All right, good morning, everybody. Let's take a look at the homework. You should have already checked your answers against everything that's in the back of the book. And so hopefully at this point you feel pretty confident about the things you got right and very curious about the things that you got wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to fly through these real quick. If I'm moving too fast, you might have to pause the video, but otherwise, if you are very familiar with what you got wrong, you should be very in tune to the problem. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We're going to start with with number 5, x squared minus x equals 12. Well, I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides and get x squared minus x minus 12 is equal to 0. It's a minus sign right there. And then I'm looking for factors of negative 12 that add up to be negative 1, and that would be positive 3 and negative 4. Okay, and then I can split that and say that x plus 3 must equal 0, so therefore x would be equal to negative 3, and x minus 4 is equal to 0, so therefore x would have to be 4. Okay, number 7, this one, I'm looking for factors of positive 12 that sum negative 7, and so that would be negative 4 and negative 3. Okay, equals 0, and so then I would know that x minus 4 is equal to 0, so therefore x would have to be 4, or x minus 3 is equal to 0, and x would be 3. There you go. Okay, moving on. Number 9. Now, this is when it starts to get at least a little bit more involved, having that coefficient out front. But we got to remember, when we have that, we always multiply that coefficient times the last term. So in this case, we have 3 times negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, and we're looking for factors of negative 6 that sum negative 5. Now, I had some people go, well, that's negative 3 and negative 2, except negative 3 times negative 2 would give me positive 6. So that's not right. So it's got to be negative 6 and positive 1. So then I split that negative 5x into those two values. So I can say minus 6x plus 1x minus 2. And so see that negative 6x and the positive 1x would come back together and give me that negative 5x. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor these first two terms and say, what can I take out of both of those? I can take a 3x out, which would leave me with x minus 2. And then for the next two, what can I take out? Well, I can only take out a 1, which would leave me with x minus 2. And then at this point, I've got 3x plus 1 times x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so then I can split it at that point and say 3x plus 1 is equal to 0 and x minus 2 is equal to 0. If this is the case, then 3x is going to be equal to negative 1 and x would be equal to negative 1/3. Or in this case, you would add 2 to both sides, you get x is equal to 2. So x is either negative 1/3 or x is 2. All right, this next one, let's see here. We are going to bring everything over to one side. So we have 2s squared minus 5s minus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, we'll go 2 times the negative 3. So this is very similar to the last one. We're looking for factors of negative 6 that sum negative 5. That again, that would be negative 6, negative 1. Let's see here. Yeah, and so I'm going to break that up and say 2s squared minus 6s plus 1s minus 3 equals 0. Factor those first two terms right here. You take a 2s out, which leaves you with s minus 3. The next one, you take a 1 out, which leaves you with s minus 3. And so then we get 2s plus 1 times s minus 3. And all of that, the product of those two is equal to 0. So we say 2s plus 1 is equal to 0, which would mean that 2s is equal to negative 1, or s is equal to negative 1/2. Or if s minus 3 is equal to 0, then s would have to be equal to 3. Okay? All right, moving on. Number 13, let's see here. For this one, we have a typo. We have a typo. That cannot be right because I do not have a z value. So hang on one second. Sorry about that, guys. I can see that I clearly have written something wrong, and so I got to look it up. Now you guys are all like, oh, it's taking forever. I apologize, but that's not what number 13 says. Number 13 should have a z right here, and it should say 12z squared minus 44z equals 45. So you got to bring everything to one side and get 12z squared minus 44z minus 45 equals 0. Now, I had some students go, well, this is a little bit out of control because when you multiply 12 times negative 45, if you use a calculator, you get negative 540. If you don't use a calculator, you might get some crazy number, who knows? But, and that's a pretty big value. And so some people are going, man, how in the world am I going to come up with factors of that? So this is really an ideal situation to completing the square, but it asks us, hey, do this by factoring. And so if nothing else, what I would look at is I'd go, well, what are easy numbers that you know that multiply together to give you that? And 54 times 10 comes to mind. 54 times 10 would give me 540, and 54 minus 10 would give me 44. So I can see this isn't too bad. While they gave me big values, it's really not that hard. So I would have 12z squared, and I'm going to go ahead and say, I got to have a negative 54z and a positive 10z minus 45 is equal to 0. So what can I take out of both 12z squared and 54z? That would be, I think, just 6z I can take out. 6z, which would leave me with 2z, I almost put a 6 there, but 6 times 2 is 12, minus 9. 6z times 9 would give me that negative 54z. Plus, what can I take out of these? I can take a 5 out. 5 times 2z would give me 10z, and then 5 times 9 would give me that 45. Okay, so then I get 6z plus 5, excuse me, times 2z minus 9 equals 0. Split that into the two values and get 6z plus 5 is equal to 0, which would mean that 6z is equal to negative 5, which would mean that z is equal to negative 5, 6. For the other part, 2z minus 9 equals 0 would mean that 2z is equal to 9, which would mean that z is equal to 9 halves. All right. Number 15, okay, second to last one of this set. So we go, all right, for these we say 6x squared plus 5x minus 4 equals 0. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Factors of negative 24 that sum positive 5. Well, that would be positive 8 and negative 3. Okay, maybe you switch the order. That doesn't matter. You'll still get the same thing. So I get 2x times 3x would give me 6x squared plus 4. I have to take a negative 1 out of here, which would give me to 3x plus 4. I split that and get 2x minus 1 times 3x plus 4 equals 0. So therefore, 2x minus 1 is going to be equal to 0, which would be to say 2x is equal to 1, x is equal to 1 half, or 3x plus 4 is equal to 0, which would mean 3x is equal to negative 4, or x is equal to negative 4 thirds. Okay, last one of this section is definitely the oddest looking. And so people might have looked at this and said, man, this problem just doesn't even look the same. And all they're doing is saying, hey, do you remember basic things like distributing? Because that's all you have to do here. This thing, the first thing I do is I distribute, and I get x squared is equal to 5x plus 500. And then follow the same basic rules. Bring everything all over to one side. So x squared minus 5x minus 500 equals 0. And then again, you might go, oh man, that's huge. Well, what factors of 500 do you know? Well, I know that 50 times 10, 25 times 20, and 25 times 20 works, okay? And so I would say this breaks up into x minus 25 and x plus 20, because negative 25 plus 20 would give me that negative 5 right there. And if you didn't get that, that's okay. Because here on out, you're going to be able to do these problems any way you want. And maybe completing the square would have made the most sense for this one. But either way, I get down to this and I say, okay, so x minus 25 is 0. So therefore, x is 25. Or x plus 20 is 0. So therefore, x is negative 20. Okay, with this next set, starting with 19, now we're doing the completing the square. Okay? And so this is where we're not setting equal to 0. So we say x squared plus 2x, half of 2 is 1, square that and we get 1. On the other side, we have the 5 that we moved over to that side, and then we have to add the 1 to it. So we get x plus 1 squared equals 6. Square root both sides, and x plus 1 is equal to the plus or minus square root of 6, which doesn't come out clean, but that doesn't matter. And so then you subtract the 1 from both sides. You get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. If you put the negative 1 behind back here, that would be okay. It's no big deal. I just think it looks easier this way. Okay? All right. Number 21. Again, bump that 11 to the other side. And so it would look like this. Half of negative 6 is negative 3. Square it, and I get 9. So I add 9 to this side as well. This becomes x minus 3, quantity squared. 11 plus 9 is 20. So square root both sides, and x minus 3 is equal to the plus or minus square root of 20, which doesn't come out clean. But then you add 3 to both sides, you get x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 20. All right? For this one, now again, these might seem like they're getting a little bit weird, but it's no big deal. We have a 1x right there. We move the 3/4 to the side. Half of 1 is 1/2. Square it, and we get 1/4. We have to add 1/4 to both sides. Now look, this one's actually going to come out clean. That's kind of nice. So we get x plus 1/2 quantity squared is equal to 1. And then when we square root, because 3/4 plus 1/4 gives me that 1. Hopefully you saw that. And then when I square root both sides, I get x plus 1/2 is equal to plus or minus, well, the square root of 1 is 1. Then you just got to deal with that 1/2. So you've got x plus 1/2 is equal to 1, and x plus 1/2 is equal to negative 1. Well, if I subtract 1/2 on this first one, I would get x is equal to 1/2. If I subtract 1/2 on the second one, I get x is equal to negative 1/2. So those are my two possible solutions. It was nice that one of them, at least for the first point, came out clean. All right, 25. Here we go. We got x squared plus 22x plus 21 equals 0. Again, I'm going to go ahead and push that 21 to the other side. I get 22x equals, I got a negative 21 over there. Half of 22 is 11. If I square that, I get 121. So I add 121 here, add 121 here, and look how that works out. This becomes x plus 11 squared, and on the other side, negative 121 plus 121 gives me 100. Or I'm sorry, negative 21 plus 121 gives me 100. Square root both sides, and you get x plus 11 equals plus or minus 10. The square root of 100 is 10. And then you can break this up and say, well, x plus 11 is either equal to 10 or x plus 11 is equal to negative 10. Those are your two possible solutions. Subtract 11 from both sides right here, and you get negative 1. Subtract 11 from both sides here, and you get negative 21. There you have it. Okay, number 27. Now, this is the first time, and I'm sorry that we didn't address these in class, but this is the first time we're going to deal with completing the square with a coefficient out front. Okay, and we got to kind of think through that a little bit, because that's going to change how this actually works a little bit. And I'm sorry, after class was over, I thought, man, we did not do one like that, and it probably would have been helpful. But that's okay. We're going to do our best right now. Okay, so when we do this, we've got to kind of take account for that too. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and still get that positive 1 to the other side and say, well, I'm going to say 2x squared plus 8x is equal to negative 1. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get that x squared all by itself. So I'm going to have to say 2 times, well, it's going to be x squared plus the 8x would become 4x equals negative 1. Now again, at this point, I do everything the same, but you got to account for all of it. Half of 4 is 2, square 2, and I get 4. But now here's the catch. I can't add 4 to this side, because I didn't add 4 to this side. I added 4 times 2, okay? That's what I added, 4 times 2. And so 4 times 2 is 8. I have to account for that. Otherwise, I'm going to get this wrong. And so when I add 4 over here, I have to add 8 to the other side. So this becomes 2 times x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals negative 1 plus 8. And why is that? It's because the 4 times the 2 gives me the 8. I added 8 to one side. I have to add 8 to the other side. Now I can break this down and say, well, 2 times x plus 2 quantity squared equals 7. And then at this point, now you can go ahead and kind of get rid of that. And say, well, now I'll go ahead and get rid of that 2 and make this say x plus 2 quantity squared equals 7/2. Now square root everything. And this becomes x plus 2 is equal to the plus or minus square root of 7/2. Super duper ugly, but who cares? Move the 2 over to the other side, you get x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 7/2. That's got to be the ugliest answer we've had all day, but it doesn't matter. It's still the answer. Okay, and lastly, let's take a look at number 29. Hopefully, if you messed up that one, How about we do this? My guess is very few people got this one right. So let's go ahead and pause the video right now and give everybody another shot at number 29. Maybe a couple of you got it right. Way to go. But let's go ahead and pause the video right now. We'll let everybody take a look at number 29, try it, and in a minute or two, I'll work it out. Okay? All right, and we're back. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Hopefully you look at this, you go, this is so much easier now. I know it's 2x squared plus 7x, move the 4 to the other side, and I get negative 4. I have to go ahead and factor out the 2, so I get x squared plus 7 halves x, okay, equals negative 4. Now, I need to cut 7 halves in half, so that's going to be 7 fourths, and then square it, which is going to give me, yuck, 49 sixteenths, okay? Now, 49 sixteenths times 2, because I've got to account for this, I got 49 sixteenths, I got to multiply by the 2. When you're multiplying a fraction by 2, you can always cut the denominator in half. And so, I don't know if you realize that or not. So, 49 over 16 times 2 is 49 over 8. And so I have to, if I added 49 over 8 over there, I have to add 49 over 8 to right here. Wow, that's super duper ugly, but that's okay. All right, at this point, you say, well, 2 times x, and we got to think, well, I had the 7 halves. I had to cut it in half again and get 7 fourths. So I say plus 7 fourths squared equals, now negative 4 in terms of 8 would be what? Negative 32 eighths plus 49 eighths. So now I've got 2 times x plus 7 fourths squared equals 17 eighths. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x plus 7 fourths quantity squared equals 17 sixteenths. Now, square root both sides. X plus 7 fourths is equal to the plus or minus square root of 17 over 16. Now, this is really very similar to a problem we did in class, and I said that this isn't the answer that would be in the back of the book. Even as we move the 7 fourths to the other side, you would have negative 7 fourths plus or minus the square root of 17 sixteenths. But see, you know the square root of 16. So this actually simplifies to negative 7 fourths plus or minus the square root of 17 over 4. And then because I have a common denominator, I can bring it together. I can say negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 4. So this is the kind of answer that would be in the back of the book, would be my guess, even though this answer back here is acceptable. Okay, hopefully you got that, and stay tuned, and we'll get started on today's lesson.